All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack the mind of history's ultimate Renaissance man. Now, when you hear the name Leonardo da Vinci, your brain probably goes straight to the Mona Lisa, right? Or maybe those wildly complex sketches of flying machines. But honestly, calling him just a painter or even just an inventor doesn't even come close to doing justice to the sheer scale of his intellect. Today, we're going to decode the life of a guy whose unquenchable curiosity literally allowed him to transcend his entire era. So right off the bat, we run into this massive paradox. Think about it. He's universally known as one of the absolute greatest painters in Western art history. I mean, his painting, the Salvator Mundi, sold for over $450 million. Yet there are fewer than 25 major paintings we can definitively say are his. And, get this, quite a few of those he just left completely unfinished. So you've got to wonder, how does someone with such a tiny portfolio cast this massive 5-century-long shadow over all of human history? Well, this comparison really hits the nail on the head. The secret to his genius wasn't just his paintbrush. It was his insatiable, obsessive curiosity about how literally everything in the world functioned. On the left, we have those sparse canvases. But look at the right. 13,000 pages. That's the surviving volume of his daily journals. You see, Leonardo didn't draw a line between art and science. To him, understanding the exact flow of water in a whirlpool or the hidden mechanics of a human heart was basically a mandatory prerequisite before he'd even pick up a brush. He had to figure out the universe before he could paint it. So to really grasp his impact, we've got a great roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the making of a genius, move into his masterpieces, unlock those secret notebooks, dive into his science and engineering, and wrap it all up with his enduring legacy. All right, Section 1, Making of a Genius, Early Life and Origins. Let's look at where it all started. Born in 1452 in the tiny hill town of Vinci. Now, because he was born out of wedlock to a notary and a lower-class woman, he was completely shut out of the rigid, elite schooling of the day. He got some basic reading, writing, and math, but almost zero formal Latin. But you know what? That was actually a massive blessing in disguise. Since he didn't have academic dogma dictating how the world was supposed to work, he just had to figure it out himself through pure observation. By his early teens, he heads to Florence, joins the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, and that is exactly where his hands-on education in chemistry, metallurgy, drafting, and painting really takes off. And that brings us to this wild 16th century anecdote from historian Giorgio Vasari. It perfectly captures the kind of awe Leonardo inspired early on, even if it's, a bit of historical myth-making. The story goes that while working on Verrocchio's painting, The Baptism of Christ, this teenage Leonardo painted an angel using the brand new technique of oil paint. He blended the landscape and the figure with such mind-blowing realism that Verrocchio supposedly put down his brush and swore he'd never paint again. Whether that actually happened or not, it shows you exactly how revolutionary Leonardo's eye for detail was right out of the gate. Moving right along to Section 2, Masterpieces of the Renaissance. Like we mentioned earlier, Leonardo didn't separate the canvas from the laboratory. They were the exact same space to him. His artistic innovations weren't just stylistic choices. They were literal scientific breakthroughs applied to art. I mean, the guy dissected human corpses and studied complex optics just so he could perfect the human form and understand exactly how light bends around it. He didn't just paint a smile. He spent months studying the microscopic muscles of the face and lips. He observed how the physical body reacts to fleeting human emotions. That's physiognomy. And of course, his ultimate game changer was sfumato, which literally translates to smoke. He figured out how to blur hard lines, seamlessly blending shadows so subjects didn't just look three-dimensional, they looked alive. Which perfectly tees up the Mona Lisa. It was that mastery of sfumato that created that incredibly famous, elusive, shadowy smile that literally still mesmerizes the world today. If you've ever wondered why her smile seems to kind of shift depending on how you look at it, it's because Leonardo used his deep knowledge of optics to subtly shadow the corners of her mouth and eyes. The brushstrokes are so perfectly blended you can't even see them. It was a level of technical perfection that just straight up didn't exist before him. All right, Section 3, The Secret Notebooks, where art meets natural science. Okay, let this number sink in for a second. 13,000. He kept a staggering 13,000 pages of daily observations. He dragged these notebooks with him absolutely everywhere. And what's actually on these pages? Oh, just about everything. You'll find sketches of geometric solids right next to the anatomy of a bear. You'll see insanely intricate designs for walking on water right beside his grocery list, or a list of people who owed him money. It's like having a direct, unfiltered download of a brilliant and, honestly, endlessly distracted mind. And here's where it gets really quirky. Because he was left-handed, and, let's face it, highly idiosyncratic, he wrote his notes backward, from right to left. It acted as this natural, though maybe unintended, encryption. If you open one of his notebooks today, the text looks like complete gibberish until you hold a mirror up to the page. Now, scholars still argue about this. Was he trying to hide his ideas from intellectual thieves? Or actually, did pulling a quill pen from right to left just stop his left hand from smudging the wet ink? Who knows for sure, but it adds this undeniable layer of mystery to the whole shebang. But what he wrote in those notebooks was profound. He arrived at monumental scientific truths entirely through his own independent observation. Check out this quote: "The sun does not move." He casually jotted this down in a notebook way before Copernicus formally published his heliocentric theory. Because Leonardo wasn't weighed down by the rigid academic rules of his time, he was free to just look up at the sky, study how light hit mountain peaks, and deduce the actual mechanics of the solar system all on his own. Absolutely mind-blowing. Next up, Section 4, Science and Engineering, Centuries Ahead. This slide is wild because his mind was conceptualizing aerodynamics and mechanical engineering literally centuries before the metal or the power sources even existed to build them. He drew an aerial screw that is fundamentally the blueprint for a modern helicopter. He pitched the Duke of Milan on a turtle-shaped armored fighting vehicle. Yeah, basically a 15th century tank. Seriously, when he wrote to the Duke looking for a job, he spent 10 paragraphs hyping up his ability to design bridges, cannons, and defensive barricades before casually throwing in at the very end, "Oh, and by the way, I can also paint." It is medical and physical discoveries. They alone would have completely revolutionized science. But because he never published his findings, they had almost zero influence on history. Think about this. Leonardo actually got permission to dissect corpses in hospitals, allowing him to create the first truly accurate topographic map of the human machine. At one point, he even built a glass aorta and pumped water with grass seed through it just so he could map the flow patterns of the heart valves. He defined liver cirrhosis. He wrote down the laws of sliding friction 200 years before anyone else. But he kept it all locked away in his notebooks. Finally, Section 5, An Enduring Legacy, the Universal Genius. By the end of his life, Leonardo had achieved this truly mythic status. Even in his final days, when he was partially paralyzed in his right hand and living as a highly honored guest of the French king Francis I, he was revered way less as a simple painter and much more as a superhuman philosopher. The king gave him a generous pension, a manor house, and basically treated him like a living treasure. When he died in 1519 at the age of 67, he left behind an unparalleled legacy. He wasn't just the guy who painted The Last Supper, he was the absolute embodiment of the Renaissance humanist ideal. Which leaves us with the ultimate what if in human history. What else might this universal genius have accomplished, and how much faster would human knowledge have advanced if he had just published those 13,000 pages of anatomical, mechanical, and astronomical breakthroughs during his lifetime? It's a huge puzzle, leaving us with a profound mystery about the true limits of human potential, and a legacy that continues to absolutely floor us over 5 centuries later. Thanks so much for joining me in decoding the ultimate Renaissance man. Catch you next time on The Explainer.